How's everybody facing the holiday season this year? Doing pretty well? Is it tough on anybody yet? It's probably tough on a few people already, yeah. So, Al was talking to me about the December gathering and said, we're looking for some ideas on some things to present. Something to get people in the mood. It's always the end of the year. It's tough on a lot of people. And in many ways, we've had a tough 2016 altogether for unrelated reasons. And he was asking me, is there any way to provide people with some little bit of inspiration, some little bit of pick-me-up, some way to face the end of the year with a bit of a smile? And I said, well, I might not be able to do it, but maybe my friend George Bailey could do it. Right? I'm sure everybody is pretty familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, the movie. It's been everywhere. It's played every year. It sort of fell out of copyright there for a while, so all the TV stations were playing it over and over and over again. And it's a perennial favorite. Lots of people talk about it. It's been parodied time and time and time again. It's entered the cultural landscape like an atomic bomb. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the messages, I think, that we can get from It's a Wonderful Life. Specifically, the lessons that George Bailey learns over the course of this movie. But before we get into that, I want to recognize, since we've got all the kids with us here, and they're probably starting to get a little bit antsy right now, I thought I might bring in some stickers and pass them out. Can we have helper a couple? And I thought that all the kids and all the kids at heart might have a little bit of fun with these stickers. Kids, take these stickers and stick them on yourselves, stick them on your friends, stick them on your parents. Don't stick them to anything else in the room, please, because we want to leave this place looking pretty well. But just, I'll remind you to do that and pass them around a little bit later as I keep talking. But this might be something a little bit fun to keep the little ones entertained and engaged. So the first thing, when I think about George Bailey, I think about how he was always willing to dream really big, right? I think that's the first lesson that George teaches us. Right from the beginning, the first time we see George as a young boy, he's got a copy of National Geographic magazine. He's excited about it. He's already thinking about traveling the world, seeing the sights. He's excited to add a little bit of coconut to Mary's ice cream because don't you know, dummy, that coconuts come from Fiji, right? He's super excited. He's already thinking way beyond the town that he grew up in. He's already dreaming big. And when he gets older, he's already starting to chomp at the bit, right? He goes to the store and he's trying to pick out a suitcase. And he can't find one big enough. He can't find one big enough to hold all of his dreams and hopes and desires to go out and see the world. When he's waxing romantic with this girl who's been pining over him, actually, since she was a young girl, he's dreaming so big that he tells her he wants to throw a lasso around the moon and pull it down and give it to her to eat. That is George Bailey. That is the type of person I think that we all should try to be. We should all try to dream as big as George Bailey, even when he was faced with setbacks, right? So this is after, of course, he's been basically had to stay at home and let his little brother go to school in his stead. He's still thinking Europe. I'm going to Europe. I'm going to South America. I got all these travel plans. And when that gets skunked and he and Mary get married, they're excited about the honeymoon, and he's got a little kitty of $5,000, and they're going to go to New York City and eat at the fanciest restaurants and stay at the best hotels. That's always what's on his mind. He's always aching to see more, to do more, to create more. And even at his darkest moments, I think this is interesting, when we see this shot of him after he's been hit with all these problems, he comes back home, we see in the corner of his living room, what has he been doing all this time? he's been making small architectural models, which was his passion. So even as he's been living his entire life in this small town, working at this little building and loan, he's been cultivating this dream over to the side the entire time. That's George Bailey, the big dreamer. I think somebody that we should all try to emulate. George Bailey is also incredibly patient. He's a big dreamer, and yes, he's anxious to leave, but he's also patient. When he gets the call, he's about to, score basically with Mary, and he gets the call that his father has had a health problem, a stroke basically. He races to see his father in his last moments, and he meets with the people that run the building and loan, and they tell him that the building and loan can only go forward now that your father's died if you take it over. He says, okay. He doesn't want to, but he's patient. He's always putting off his dream in order to do the thing that's important right now. So he's balancing the two. And when he meets one of his former classmates, Roger Wainwright, this is his younger brother. His younger brother comes home with a new wife. And he's been expecting his younger brother, Harry, to take over the family business. But he comes home with this new wife and a new job, and he realizes that he has to be patient some more. And then when he meets Roger Wainwright and he sees the life that he could have lived, this fancy life in New York City, he's still patient even then. He's still waiting and doing what's necessary right now in order for a later payoff. George Bailey also is someone who is amazing in his capacity to conquer fear. Right? One of the first things we see George doing is jumping into a freezing lake to save his brother. Something that could have killed him. Something that we're told would have definitely killed his brother had he not been there. But George runs over there immediately and jumps in to save his brother. Later, as he's working at the drugstore, he sees that his boss has mistakenly put poison in medicine for some sick little boy. And he's afraid to say anything. And he goes from adult to adult. He's looking for somebody to tell him what to do, but nobody can give him some time. And so he finally overcomes his fear and confronts his boss. And he's wounded by that. He's hurt by that, but he does it anyway because he's able to overcome his fear. And later, when he's afraid of how life is passing him by, he goes and he meets with Mary, somewhat begrudgingly. And they share a tender moment, and you can see in that moment that he's afraid of the fact that he's falling in love with her. Because if he falls in love with her, that means that he has to stay there even longer, that he has to build a life there in that town. But he conquers that fear and marries her. And when they go off on the honeymoon, or they're planning to go off on their honeymoon, there's a run on the bank. This is fear writ large. This is economic fear of the entire community. You see all these people running to the bank to try to get their money out. And he knows that people are going to do the same thing at the building alone where he works. And he goes in there and he sees an entire town beset by fear. And he controls them. He doesn't let it get to them. He stands strong like a rock through this whole process. And he takes the $5,000 kitty that he had for his honeymoon and he dishes it out to everyone. So everyone has a little something. Everyone can make it until the next payday. He loses his honeymoon, but he conquers the fear. And when he's confronted that directly by Potter, Potter makes him this offer, this devilish offer. Why don't you come work for me instead, and I'll pay you as much money as you can dream about. You just have to close the building alone. He comes so close to succumbing to that fear and giving in to Potter, but at the last minute he says, no, I won't. Which is why when we see George Bailey at this moment, when Potter looks him in the eye and tells him that you are worth more dead than alive, all you have to your name is a $500 insurance policy. And we see that the fear has overcome George, and that's when our hearts break for him, So we know he's been fighting that fear his entire life, and he has succumbed to it. And he is willing to do the thing that we know that he cannot do, he should not do in that moment. And it terrifies us because we think to ourselves, if we were in that moment, we would be thinking the same thing. And the brilliance of what happens to George is that Clarence shows him exactly what those fears would manifest into if he were not ever born, right? We see Pottersville instead of Bedford Falls. We see his boss, who has gone to prison for killing the boy. We see that his mother has forgotten him. Mary has no idea who he is. His brother is dead because he wasn't there to save him. And he is consumed by fear. And in that, he recognizes what his value is as a person, what his value is to everyone else in his life. And he asks to go back. He has to have things set right, set back to where they were. Even if it means him going to prison, even if it means the ruin of his business, he wants to go back, and he's happy. He's thrilled. That's why we see him shouting for joy once he realizes that he's in Bedford Falls. All right, I see the kids are doing a good job of passing out the stickers. I don't have to remind you. Excellent. Keep it up. And the last thing that we learned from George Bailey is how to love well. And this is also something that throughout his life we see him doing, right? We see him as a child taking care of his brother. We see him looking out for his boss. And his boss remembers that, right? So he goes to this luggage store to try to find the biggest suitcase they have, and they don't have it for him. Why? Because his boss, Mr. Gower, already bought it for him and had it inscribed with his name. Because he loves him. Because he recognizes the value of George Bailey. He recognizes what George Bailey means to him and means to that community. Mary loves him, right? So when all hope is lost, seemingly, for their honeymoon and their marriage has started on a misfire, she arranges everything for him in this dumpy little old house that she always wanted to live in. The worst, most terrible house in the town. But she fixes it up for him to show him how much she loves him. And it's a reflection of how much he has loved her. And his friends, we see him caring for his friends. There's this great scene where Violet, the girl who's been sort of chasing him unsuccessfully throughout the story, she finds herself in some bit of trouble and she wants to leave town, and he authorizes her alone through the building alone because he cares about her. He helps out his friends, and he takes care of his family when his children are sick. Even when he's in the midst of a depressive spiral, even when things in his life seem out of control, he's able to find 5 minutes to be tender with his young daughter who's sick in bed and take care of her flower that's been bruised and wounded. And after he's gone through his ordeal, he rushes back home, and what's the first thing he wants to do? He wants to surround himself with his family. He wants to surround himself with his kids, with his wife, and he finds out that his wife has orchestrated this fundraising in his absence while he's been going through this ordeal. She's been going around to everyone in town telling them exactly what has been happening. And he gets this little note from Clarence in a book inscribed, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which I think might be a little bit of a clue that this is someone at work here putting this movie together is some sort of a free-thinking humanist. Certainly not Frank Capra. But it's inscribed, "No man is a failure who has friends." And what is the last scene in this movie? He's not only surrounded by his family, he's surrounded by everyone in his community, everyone whose lives he's touched. As soon as they find out that he is in trouble, they want to help him. They show up en masse, the entire town, it seems like, in his house, and bail him out of this problem that he finds himself in through no fault of his own. And he's willing to take the fall for it, of course. But they won't let him take the fall for it. They help him out. And then his younger brother arrives and raises a glass and toasts to George Bailey. He says, "The richest man in town." And when he says that, we know it's true. And George Bailey knows it's true. And when I see my young son with his friends spending time together, and my friends, and standing here in front of all you, I think to myself, I feel like the richest man in town as well. Thank you all for being here.